London, 1893. In a city governed by whispers and ruined by scandal, silence is the most dangerous weapon of all. Miss Chloe Vance believed she was invisible, a woman with no fortune, no title, and a past she kept buried. She was wrong. She was being watched. It began with a cup of tea in a crowded Mayfair salon. It ended with a lie that would shake the British aristocracy to its foundation. One whispered sentence from a desperate dowager duchess changed everything. Pretend you are my son's fiancée, or we are both destroyed. But Chloe didn't know that the Duke was a man with secrets darker than her own, and playing his wife would require more than just acting. It would require surviving him. The rain in London didn't wash things clean. It merely made the grime slicker. Inside Gunther's tea shop on Berkeley Square, the air was thick with the scent of damp wool, expensive perfume, and Darjeeling. Chloe Vance sat at a small, wobbly table in the corner, the one usually reserved for governesses or poor relations. She was neither, though her grey serge dress suggested the latter. She was simply alone. Chloe carefully counted the coins in her reticule. Enough for the tea, but not the scone. She closed the clasp with a sharp snap. At 24, Chloe had mastered the art of being invisible. To the high society surrounding her, she was part of the furniture, unremarkable, plain, and easily ignored. That was exactly how she survived. She lifted her cup, the china warming her cold fingertips, when the atmosphere in the shop shifted. The ambient chatter didn't stop, but it lowered in pitch, a collective intake of breath. A woman had stopped at Chloe's table. She was imposing, dressed in mourning blacks that cost more than Chloe's entire life's earnings. A veil of heavy lace obscured her face, but the silver-handled cane she slammed silently onto the floorboards demanded attention. It was Lady Beatrice Thorne, the Dowager Duchess of Blackwood, a woman known in the tabloids as the Iron Matriarch. Chloe began to rise, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Your Grace, Sit down," Beatrice commanded. Her voice was not loud, but it possessed the kind of authority that could stop a charging regiment. "And do not look at the door." Chloe sat. Her hands trembled, causing the tea to ripple in her cup. "I don't understand. Have I offended you, Your Grace?" Lady Beatrice pulled out the chair opposite Chloe and sat with a rustle of silk. She lifted her veil. Her face was a map of sharp lines and terrified eyes. This was not the face of a tyrant. It was the face of a woman cornered. "You are Chloe Vance," Beatrice said, "daughter of the late Captain Vance. You speak French and Italian, you can balance a ledger better than a banker, and you are currently 3 weeks away from being evicted from your lodgings in Cheapside." Chloe went cold. "How do you know that I make it my business to know the invisible women of London? You are observant, Miss Vance. You watch people. I've seen you sketching in the park, capturing their secrets on paper." Beatrice leaned forward, her gloved hand gripping the table edge. "I need your skills, immediately." "My skills?" Chloe asked, bewildered. "I am a seamstress, Your Grace. Occasionally a tutor." "I don't need a hem fixed," Beatrice hissed, her eyes darting toward the entrance of the tea shop, where a carriage had just pulled up. It was a flashy, crimson thing, emblazoned with the crest of the Sterling family. "I need a shield," the bell above the door chimed. A hush fell over the room as a young woman entered. She was breathtakingly beautiful, dressed in ruby red velvet that was slightly too bold for daytime. Lady Genevieve Sterling, the woman the newspapers called the Black Widow of Belgravia. 3 fiancés, 3 mysterious accidents, and a fortune that kept growing. Beatrice's face paled. "She is here for my son. Sebastian, the Duke. I don't see how this concerns me, Chloe whispered, though she couldn't tear her eyes away from the predator in red velvet scanning the room. Genevieve holds a promissory note, Beatrice said rapidly, the words tumbling out. A gambling debt my late husband incurred. She intends to call it in today. The price of forgiveness is marriage to my son. Sebastian is difficult. He will refuse her, and she will ruin us. She will take Blackwood Manor, the London house, everything. Unless... Beatrice reached across the table and gripped Chloe's wrist. The Duchess's grip was bruising. Unless he is already spoken for, Beatrice finished, by a woman who is unimpeachable intelligent and unknown enough to be a mystery. A woman who can lie to a shark's face and not blink. Chloe tried to pull her hand away. This is madness. I cannot... £5,000, Beatrice whispered. Chloe froze. £5,000 was a fortune. It was independence. It was safety. It was a cottage by the sea where she would never have to count pennies for a scone again. Why me? Chloe asked, her voice shaking. Why not one of the debutantes? Because they are soft, Beatrice snapped. And you, Miss Vance, have the eyes of a survivor. Look at her. She gestured slightly toward Genevieve, who was moving through the crowd, her eyes hunting for the Duchess. She is coming over here. In 10 seconds, she will ask where my son is. If I say he is single, the trap snaps shut. If I say he is engaged to you, we buy time. Time for what? Time to find the loophole in the debt. Time to save my family. Beatrice's eyes pleaded. Please, it is only for the season. Once the debt is settled, you break the engagement, keep the money, and vanish. The footsteps of Lady Genevieve were audible now, clicking closer on the hardwood. 5 seconds, Miss Vance, Beatrice whispered. Chloe looked at the money in her purse. She looked at the terrifying woman approaching them. And then she looked at the desperate mother across from her. Do we have a deal? Beatrice asked. Genevieve Sterling stopped at their table, a smile curving her lips that didn't reach her cold blue eyes. Duchess, she purred. So lovely to find you. I was hoping we could discuss the matter of the estate and Sebastian's future. Chloe felt the air leave the room. Beatrice remained frozen, her mouth opening, but no sound coming out. Chloe set her teacup down with a deliberate clink. She turned her head, met Genevieve's predatory gaze, and smiled a sharp, dangerous smile she didn't know she possessed. I'm afraid, Chloe said, her voice steady and clear, cutting through the silence of the shop, that the Duke's future is already accounted for. Isn't that right, Beatrice? Genevieve's smile faltered. Beatrice let out a breath that sounded like a sob. Yes, the Duchess choked out, squeezing Chloe's hand. Lady Sterling, may I introduce you to Miss Chloe Vance, my son's fiancée. The carriage ride to Blackwood House was conducted in a suffocating silence. The rain hammered against the roof, mirroring the chaotic rhythm of Chloe's heart. She was no longer Chloe Vance, invisible seamstress. She was now the shield of the House of Thorn, and she was terrified. The mansion loomed out of the fog like a fortress, dark stone, and gargoyles that seemed to weep rainwater. He will be angry, Beatrice said, as the footman opened the carriage door. It was the first thing she had said in 20 minutes. The Duke, Chloe asked, gathering her skirts to avoid the puddles. Sebastian is particular. He does not like surprises, and he despises deception. Beatrice looked weary. But he despises Genevieve Sterling more. Remember that. They entered the grand foyer. It was cavernous, smelling of beeswax and old damp stone. The servants lined up, their eyes widening as they saw the stranger walking beside the Dowager Duchess. "Where is he?" Beatrice asked the butler, a man named Henderson, who looked as if he was carved from granite. "In the library, Your Grace. He gave orders not to be disturbed." "Good," Beatrice muttered. She turned to Chloe. "Stay close. Do not let him intimidate you. If you show fear, he will tear you apart. He is like a wolf that way." Chloe straightened her spine. She had dealt with debt collectors, lecherous landlords, and hunger. A grumpy duke was just another obstacle. Beatrice pushed open the heavy double doors of the library. The room was vast, lined floor to ceiling with books. A fire roared in the hearth, casting long, dancing shadows. Standing by the window, staring out at the storm, was a man. Sebastian Thorne was tall, imposingly so. His shoulders were broad, straining against the fabric of his dark coat. When he turned, Chloe felt a physical jolt. He was devastatingly handsome, with dark, unruly hair and a jawline sharp enough to cut glass. But it was his eyes that held her dark, stormy, and currently filled with cold fury. "Mother," he said. His voice was a low baritone that vibrated in the floorboards. "I explicitly told Henderson to keep the vultures away." "I brought a guest, Sebastian," Beatrice said, her voice trembling slightly. Sebastian's gaze shifted to Chloe. He looked her up and down, dissecting her in a second. He saw the frayed hem of her sleeve, the sensible shoes, the defiance in her chin. He dismissed her instantly. "Pay the girl for whatever charity work you've hired her for, and send her away. I am drinking." He moved toward a crystal decanter on his desk. "She is not a charity case," Beatrice said, stepping further into the room. "She is your fiancée." Sebastian froze. The crystal stopper in his hand paused mid-air. Slowly, very slowly, he turned back to them. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with electricity. "Excuse me," he said softly. "Genevieve cornered me at Gunther's," Beatrice blurted out. "She was going to call the debt. She was going to announce the foreclosure unless I agreed to the marriage. I panicked. I told her you were already engaged." Sebastian slammed the decanter down. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "You did what? It was the only way," Beatrice cried. She backed off Sebastian. She was stunned, but she demanded proof. "She is coming here tonight for the introductory dinner. If you do not have a fiancé by 8 o'clock, we lose Blackwood." Sebastian ran a hand over his face, a gesture of pure exhaustion and rage. He stalked toward Chloe, stopping inches from her. He smelled of brandy rain and anger. "And who are you?" he sneered. "Some actress my mother plucked from a stage." "How much is she paying you to play this farce?" £5,000, Chloe said. She didn't step back. She forced herself to look up into his angry eyes. Sebastian laughed a harsh, humorless sound. 5,000. You sell yourself cheaply, darling. Genevieve will eat you alive before the soup course." "I have handled worse than a socialite in red velvet," Chloe retorted. Sebastian stopped laughing. He narrowed his eyes, really looking at her for the first time. Do you know who Genevieve is?" "She is a viper. She will dig into your past. She will find every skeleton you have." "Do you have skeletons, Miss Vance?" Chloe supplied. "And yes, Your Grace, everyone has skeletons. The difference is mine are buried under poverty, not scandal. They are harder to find." Sebastian stared at her. For a moment, the silence stretched tense and brittle. He was testing her, waiting for her to break, to apologize, to run away weeping. Chloe held his gaze. She thought of the cold room in Cheapside. She thought of her father's disgrace. She thought of the life she could have with that money. "I am not asking you to love me, Your Grace," she said quietly. "I am asking you to tolerate me for the length of a season. I will be silent, I will be polite, and I will be the perfect prop for your defiance. And when the debt is cleared, I will disappear as if I never existed." Sebastian studied her face. The anger in his eyes receded slightly, replaced by a grudging curiosity. He walked a circle around her, inspecting her like a horse at an auction. "She has no jewelry," he observed to his mother. "We have the family vault," Beatrice said, hopeful. "She wears grey serge," he noted with disdain. "I have a dressmaker coming within the hour," Beatrice added. Sebastian stopped in front of Chloe again. He leaned down, his face close to hers. "You are playing a dangerous game, Miss Vance. My world is not a tea shop. It is a battlefield. If you falter, if you slip, Genevieve will destroy you just for the sport of it, and I will not save you." "I don't need saving," Chloe said, her voice steel. "I need the money. You need a fiancé. It is a transaction, nothing more." Sebastian stared at her for a long heartbeat. Then a corner of his mouth twitched upward. It wasn't a smile, but it was close. "A transaction," he repeated. "Very well." He walked back to his desk and poured 2 glasses of brandy. He returned and held one out to Chloe. "Drink," he commanded. "You're going to need it." Chloe took the glass. The amber liquid burned her throat, but it steadied her hands. "One condition," Sebastian said, raising his own glass. "When we are in private, the act drops. I do not want a simpering fake wife in my own home. You stay out of my way, I stay out of yours. Agreed?" "Agreed," Chloe said. "Good." Sebastian checked his pocket watch. "It is 5:00 p.m. Genevieve arrives at 8:00. That gives us 3 hours to turn an invisible spinster into a future duchess." He turned to his mother. "Get the diamonds, Mother. The heavy ones. If we are going to lie, let us make it a brilliant one." As Beatrice hurried out of the room, Sebastian turned back to the window watching the storm. But Chloe noticed something she hadn't before. His hand, the one holding the glass, was gripping it so tightly his knuckles were white. He wasn't just angry. He was afraid. "What does she really have on you?" Chloe asked, her voice soft. "It isn't just a gambling debt, is it?" Sebastian stiffened. He didn't turn around. "You are here to be a mannequin, Miss Vance, not a confessor. Do not ask questions you do not want the answers to." Chloe fell silent. She had secured the deal. She had entered the lion's den. But as thunder rattled the window panes, she realized that the monster outside the gates, Lady Genevieve, might be the least of her worries. The real danger was the man standing in front of her, a man made of secrets and shadows, whose fake ring was about to weigh heavier than chains. The transformation of Chloe Vance was not a fairy tale. It was an excavation. Upstairs in the guest suite, a series of rooms larger than the entire boarding house she lived in. Chloe stood before a cheval mirror, arms outstretched. The air in the room was hot stiflingly, so filled with the scent of lavender water and the metallic tang of fear. 2 maids, silent and efficient as ghosts, pulled the laces of her corset tight. "Tighter," Lady Beatrice commanded from the chaise lounge. "She must look breathless. A woman in love is always breathless, or perhaps that is just the panic. Either way, the effect is the same." Chloe gasped as the whalebone stays constricted her ribs. She felt as though she were being encased in armor. In a way she was. The dress Beatrice had chosen was a deep midnight blue silk, the color of a bruised sky. It was cut low across the bosom, far lower than anything Chloe had ever dared to wear, and trimmed with black lace that cascaded down the skirt like intricate shadows. It was a dress meant for a woman who commanded rooms, not one who hid in corners. "Sit," Beatrice said, gesturing to the vanity table. The older woman stood and opened a velvet box that had been resting on her lap. The hinges groaned. Inside lay the blackwood emeralds. They were ancient, heavy stones, set in dark gold, looking less like jewelry and more like shackles forged for a queen. Beatrice fastened the necklace around Chloe's throat. The stones were ice-cold against her heated skin. "These were my grandmother's," Beatrice whispered, her eyes meeting Chloe's in the mirror. "She wore them when she told the king to go to hell. They carry a certain resilience." "I feel like an imposter," Chloe murmured, touching the cold gems. "Anyone who looks closely will see the seamstress beneath the silk. My hands are rough. My accent slips when I am tired." "Then do not get tired," a deep voice said from the doorway. Chloe spun around the heavy skirts, swishing around her ankles. Sebastian stood leaning against the doorframe. He had changed into formal evening wear, a stark black tailcoat and a white cravat tied with severe precision. If he had looked dangerous in the library, he looked devastating now. He was the perfect image of a Gothic aristocrat, dark, brooding, and terrifyingly composed. He waved the maids and his mother away. "Leave us. I need to speak with my fiancée, alone." Beatrice hesitated, glancing between the two of them, before nodding and ushering the maids out. The door clicked shut, leaving a sudden heavy silence in the room. Sebastian pushed off the doorframe and walked slowly toward Chloe. He didn't look at her face. He looked at the necklace. "The blackwood yoke," he noted dryly. "Mother didn't hold back. She's branded you with the family curse already." "It's beautiful," Chloe said, her hand instinctively covering the stones, as if to protect them from his cynicism. "It is heavy," Sebastian corrected. He stopped a few feet from her, his presence dominating the space. The smell of brandy was gone, replaced by the scent of sandalwood and rain-dampened wool. "Turn around." Chloe hesitated, then turned her back to him. She felt the heat of his body radiating against hers, though he did not touch her. She heard the rustle of fabric as he reached into his pocket. "If we are to sell this lie, Miss Vance, we cannot have you wearing empty fingers. Genevieve checks for rings before she checks for a pulse." He reached around her, taking her left hand in his. His hand was large, warm, and calloused, the hand of a man who rode horses and perhaps threw punches, not just a man who signed ledgers. He slid a ring onto her fourth finger. It was not a delicate diamond. It was a sapphire, dark and almost black, surrounded by jagged diamonds that looked like teeth. It fit perfectly. "My great-aunt's," Sebastian murmured, his breath stirring the loose curls at the nape of her neck. "She poisoned her husband. Fitting, don't you think?" Chloe turned back to face him. The ring felt heavy, anchoring her hand to her side. "You seem determined to frighten me." "Your Grace, is it because you think I will run?" "I think everyone runs eventually," Sebastian said, his dark eyes searching hers. "Genevieve is not just a creditor, Chloe. She is a predator. She collects people. She finds the one thing they are ashamed of, and she presses on it until they break. So I am going to ask you one time, and you are going to answer me with the truth." He stepped closer, invading her personal space until she had to tilt her head back to look at him. "What is the thing you are most afraid of her finding?" he asked softly. "Is it a lover? A child? A theft?" Chloe's breath hitched. The air in the room felt suddenly thin. She thought of the small, drafty room in Cheapside, She thought of the letters hidden under her mattress, the ones with the French stamps. "My father," she whispered. "Captain Vance didn't die a hero, Your Grace. He died in a debtor's prison, raving mad after gambling away my mother's dowry and my future. I spent 2 years working in a laundry to pay for his burial so he wouldn't be thrown in a pauper's grave. If Genevieve finds out I am the daughter of Vance the cheat, she will know I am desperate for money. She will know I am bought." Sebastian's expression didn't change, but the hardness in his eyes softened just a fraction. He looked at her not as a prop, but as a person who understood the humiliation of a parent's sins. "Vance the cheat," Sebastian repeated quietly. "I remember the scandal. I was at Oxford." "Then you know I am unmarriageable," Chloe said, lifting her chin. "I am social poison." "Perfect," Sebastian said. "So am I." He offered her his arm. The gesture was formal, but there was a new tension in it, a pact formed in the shadows of their shared disgrace. "The story is this," Sebastian instructed, as she laid her hand on his sleeve. "We met 3 months ago at the National Gallery. You were sketching the Turner painting, The Fighting Temeraire. I was brooding. We argued about the use of light. I found your intellect maddening and your smile disarming. We have been meeting in secret because you were ashamed of my reputation, and I was possessive of your privacy." Chloe blinked. "That is surprisingly detailed." "The best lies always are," Sebastian said, leading her toward the door. "And Miss Vance?" "Yes." "When we walk through those doors downstairs, you are not the seamstress. You are the woman who brought the Duke of Blackwood to his knees. Look at Genevieve, as if she is the help. If you show weakness, she will smell blood." "I understand," Chloe said, gripping his arm tighter. "Good," Sebastian murmured, opening the door to the dark hallway. "Then let us go and feed the shark." The dining room at Blackwood Manor was designed to intimidate. The walls were covered in dark mahogany paneling, and the ceiling was lost in shadow high above. The only light came from 2 massive candelabras on the long table, casting flickering skeletal shadows against the portraits of dead ancestors who seemed to glare down in judgment. Outside, the storm had intensified. Thunder rattled the silverware, a low, ominous drum roll for the evening ahead. Chloe sat at the right hand of the Duke. The chair was high-backed and stiff, forcing her to sit with perfect posture. Across from her sat Lady Beatrice, who looked as though she was about to face a firing squad. And at the center of their attention, seated opposite Sebastian, was Lady Genevieve Sterling. She was radiant in the candlelight. Her red velvet dress was slashed with gold, and she wore a necklace of rubies that looked like drops of fresh blood against her pale throat. She ate her soup with mechanical precision, her eyes darting between Sebastian and Chloe, like a viper assessing the distance to its strike. "This bisque is delightful, Beatrice," Genevieve said, her voice smooth as silk. "Though it tastes a bit rustic. Did you change cooks? I heard the old chef left. Something about unpaid wages." Beatrice flinched, her spoon clattering against the bowl. "He retired, Genevieve, to the country." "How charming," Genevieve smiled, showing too many teeth. She turned her gaze to Chloe. "And you, Miss Vance, you are a mystery. I confess I pride myself on knowing everyone worth knowing in London. Yet I have never heard your name whispered in the salons." Chloe felt Sebastian's body tense beside her. She carefully placed her spoon down. "I prefer to listen rather than whisper, Lady Sterling," Chloe said calmly. "One learns more that way." Genevieve raised an eyebrow. Is that so? And what have you learned about our dear Sebastian? He is not an easy man to love. His last fiancée. Well, poor girl. She found the solitude of Blackwood quite maddening. She left in the middle of the night, didn't she, Sebastian? She broke the engagement mutually. Sebastian said, his voice cold and sharp, and she is happily married now in Kent. To a vicar. Genevieve laughed lightly. A safe, boring choice. But Miss Vance doesn't strike me as the vicar type. She strikes me as hungry. Genevieve leaned forward, the candlelight reflecting in her blue eyes. Tell me, Chloe, may I call you Chloe? How exactly did you two meet? Sebastian is notorious for avoiding society. Did you ambush him in a park? The National Gallery, Chloe said smoothly, remembering the script. 3 months ago, room 34. I was sketching Turner's The Fighting Temeraire. Turner, Genevieve mused. Sebastian hates Turner. He calls him messy. I do, Sebastian interrupted, taking a sip of wine. But Chloe argued that the chaos was the point. She told me I was looking at the paint, not the emotion. It was refreshing to be corrected. Corrected. Genevieve looked at Sebastian with feigned shock. You allowed someone to correct you. My, you must be in love. She turned back to Chloe, her eyes narrowing. And your family. Chloe. Where do the Vances hail from? I knew a Vance once. A captain. Dreadful gambler. Lost everything on a horse named Fallen Star. Any relation? The room went deathly silent. The thunder outside cracked, shaking the window panes. Beatrice stopped breathing. Sebastian's hand on the table clenched into a fist. This was the test. Genevieve didn't know. She was fishing. But she had cast her line exactly where the wound was deepest. Chloe felt the blood drain from her face, but she forced her hand to remain steady as she reached for her wine glass. She swirled the red liquid, watching the vortex. A common name, Chloe said, her voice devoid of emotion. My father was a scholar, Lady Stirling. He spent his life in books, not at the races. He taught me that the loudest people in the room are usually the ones with the most to hide. She took a sip of wine and looked Genevieve directly in the eye. Perhaps that is why Sebastian and I suit each other. We appreciate quiet. Genevieve stared at her. For a moment the mask slipped, revealing a flash of genuine annoyance. She hadn't expected the mouse to bite back. A scholar? Genevieve repeated, her tone dripping with skepticism. How noble. And yet here you are wearing the Blackwood emeralds. They look heavy on you, darling. Almost like they're weighing you down. I find them grounding, Chloe replied. They are cursed, you know, Genevieve whispered, leaning in closer over the centerpiece of dying roses. The first Duchess who wore them went mad. She claimed she could hear the stones whispering to her. She jumped from the east tower. Genevieve smiled cruelly. Do you hear them whispering, Chloe? Do they tell you that you don't belong here? Enough! Sebastian slammed his hand on the table. The sound was violent, startling the footmen in the shadows. You are a guest in my home, Genevieve, Sebastian snarled. You will treat my future wife with respect, or you will leave, debt or no debt. Genevieve sat back unfazed. She dabbed her mouth with a linen napkin. So touchy, Sebastian. I am merely looking out for you. You are impulsive. You make rash decisions when you are cornered. I would hate to see you marry a fortune hunter just to avoid your obligations to me. She stood up slowly, the red velvet rippling around her. She walked around the table, her hand trailing along the back of Sebastian's chair, until she reached Chloe. She stopped behind Chloe, leaning down, so her lips were inches from Chloe's ear. "You are good," Genevieve whispered, low enough that Beatrice couldn't hear, but Sebastian could. "You are very good. But I see the calluses on your fingers, Miss Vance. I see the way you look at the silverware, calculating its worth. You aren't a fiancée. You're an employee." Genevieve straightened up and addressed the room. "I think I shall retire. The storm is giving me a headache. Sebastian, darling, we will discuss the paperwork in the morning. If this engagement is indeed real, I shall need to see the banns posted, and perhaps an engagement announcement in the Times. It will be there tomorrow." Sebastian lied through gritted teeth. "Splendid." Genevieve walked to the door, then paused. She looked back at Chloe with a cold, terrifying smile. "Sleep well, Chloe. The East Tower is particularly drafty this time of year. Try not to let the ghosts keep you awake." She swept out of the room. The moment the door clicked shut, Beatrice let out a sob and buried her face in her hands. Chloe slumped in her chair, the adrenaline crashing out of her system. She felt shaking. Sebastian didn't move. He stared at the empty doorway, his jaw locked tight. Then slowly he turned to look at Chloe. "She knows," Chloe whispered. "She doesn't have proof yet. But she knows." "She suspects," Sebastian corrected. He stood up and walked over to Chloe. He reached out not to touch her but to grip the back of her chair, boxing her in. "But you stood your ground. You lied about your father beautifully." "I didn't lie," Chloe said, looking up at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "My father was a scholar before the gambling took him. That was the tragedy of it." Sebastian looked at her, a flicker of something painful crossing his face. For a second, the Duke and the seamstress were just two children of broken legacies trapped in a house of stone. "Tomorrow," Sebastian said, his voice low and rough. "We go to London. We post the announcement. We make this official." "And then?" Chloe asked. "And then?" Sebastian said, looking at the storm raging against the glass. "We prepare for war." Because Genevieve wasn't retreating Chloe. She was going to sharpen her knives. The London season did not welcome outsiders. It scrutinized them. 3 days after the dinner at Blackwood Manor, Chloe found herself standing at the top of the marble staircase in the Duchess of Albemarle's ballroom on Park Lane. The air was thick with the scent of hothouse tuberoses, beeswax polish, and the metallic tang of expensive jewelry. Below her, a sea of pastel silks and black tailcoats swirled in a dizzying kaleidoscope. "Breathe," Sebastian murmured beside her. He was dressed in severe black, a stark contrast to the peacocks of the peerage. His hand rested on the small of her back, a touch that was technically possessive, meant to signal to the room that she was his. Through the layers of her silk gown, his hand felt like a brand. "I am breathing," Chloe whispered back. Her fingers gripping her fan so tightly the mother-of-pearl ribs threatened to snap. "They are staring, all of them." "Of course they are," Sebastian said, his voice low and devoid of warmth. "They are wolves, Chloe. They have smelled fresh meat. They are wondering how a nobody with no dowry ensnared the Duke of Blackwood. They are waiting for you to trip on your hem or use the wrong fork." "You are incredibly encouraging," she retorted. "I'm honest. Now chin up. Smile as if you know a secret they would kill to hear." They descended the stairs. Every step was a performance. The murmurs rose like a tide as they approached the floor, whispers behind fans' monocles, raised heads turning. "Who is she?" "The Vance girl. The gambler's daughter. Look at the ring. It's the sapphire eye. He actually did it." Chloe felt the weight of their judgment pressing against her chest. She saw Lady Genevieve Sterling across the room, holding court near the orchestra. Genevieve was dressed in silver, looking like a blade sharpened by moonlight. She raised her champagne glass to Chloe, a mock salute. "She is watching," Chloe murmured. "Let her watch," Sebastian said. "The waltz is starting. We dance." I haven't danced since I was 18. Chloe panicked. "I will step on your feet. Then I will endure the pain," Sebastian said, sweeping her onto the floor before she could protest. He pulled her into his frame. It was a shocking intimacy. For the past 3 days they had been polite strangers, living in the same house, speaking only of strategy. Now his body was pressed against hers, hard and unyielding. His hand clasped hers, his other hand secure on her waist. The music began a Strauss waltz, sweeping and melancholic. They moved. To Chloe's shock, she hadn't forgotten the steps. Or perhaps it was that Sebastian led with such absolute authority that she had no choice but to follow. They spun through the crowd, a dark blur amidst the pastels. "You are trembling." Sebastian noted his mouth close to her ear. "I feel like a fraud," Chloe confessed, looking at the cravat tied at his throat, because she couldn't bear to look him in the eye. "Every woman here has a pedigree. I have a rent book and a half-empty purse." "Look at them," Sebastian commanded. "Look at Lord Harrow over there, the one with the red sash. He beats his horses and his wife. Look at the Countess of Fife. She hasn't paid her dressmaker in 3 years. They are all frauds, Chloe. They just have better costumes." Chloe looked up, meeting his gaze. His eyes were dark, serious, and strangely anchoring. In the swirling chaos of the ballroom, he was the only solid thing. "Why do you hate them?" she asked softly. "You are one of them." "No," Sebastian said, spinning her past a cluster of gossiping debutantes. "I am their landlord. I am their bank. But I am not one of them. I learned a long time ago that this society eats its own young to survive." His grip on her waist tightened slightly. "My brother Arthur. He loved this world. He played their games, and it destroyed him." It was the first time he had mentioned a brother. Beatrice had never spoken of one. "I didn't know you had a brother," Chloe said. "He died 4 years ago," Sebastian said, his face closing off like a shuttered window. "A riding accident, or so the papers said." The music swelled to a crescendo. To the onlookers, the Duke and his fiancée were lost in a romantic trance. In reality, they were standing on a precipice of shared grief. "Sebastian," Chloe whispered. "Is that what Genevieve knows? Something about Arthur?" Sebastian stiffened. He missed a step, a tiny, imperceptible falter that only Chloe noticed. "Don't," he warned. "If I am to play your wife, I need to know the battlefield," she insisted. Before he could answer, the music ended. The room broke into polite applause. Sebastian released her immediately, stepping back as if her touch burned. The mask of the arrogant Duke slammed back into place. "I need a drink," he said abruptly. "Wait here. Do not speak to anyone." He turned and strode toward the terrace doors, leaving Chloe alone in the center of the floor. It was a mistake. The moment Sebastian was gone, the sharks circled. 2 debutantes giggled behind their fans, but the real predator made her move. Lady Genevieve glided through the crowd, the sea of people parting for her. She stopped in front of Chloe, smelling of crushed lilies and malice. "A lovely performance, darling," Genevieve drawled. "Although he looked a bit eager to get away, didn't he?" Sebastian always did have a low tolerance for boredom. "We are quite happy, thank you," Chloe said, channeling every ounce of dignity she possessed. Genevieve laughed, a cold, tinkling sound. "Happy? How quaint. Tell me, Chloe, has he taken you to the nursery yet, or the attic rooms in the London house?" Chloe froze. "I don't know what you mean." "Oh, I think you will." Genevieve smiled. She stepped closer, invading Chloe's personal space. "You see, Sebastian thinks he is paying for a wife, but he's really paying for silence. Ask him about Clara, my dear. Ask him who the little ghost is that cries in his house when the thunder rolls." Genevieve reached out and adjusted the strap of Chloe's gown, her fingers cold against Chloe's skin. "When you find out what he is really hiding," Genevieve whispered, "you won't want his money. You'll want to run. And when you do, I'll be waiting to take back what is mine." Genevieve patted Chloe's cheek and walked away, leaving Chloe standing in the middle of the crowded ballroom, shivering despite the heat. The drive back to the London townhouse on Grosvenor Square was conducted in silence. Sebastian stared out the window, his jaw working. Chloe sat opposite him, Genevieve's words echoing in her mind. Ask him about Clara. When they arrived, the house was dark, save for a single lamp burning in the hall. It was a massive echoing structure, far colder than the country estate. "Go to bed," Sebastian said, as he handed his coat to the sleepy butler. "We have a meeting with the solicitors in the morning." "Who is Clara?" The name hung in the damp air of the foyer. Sebastian froze. The butler Henderson went perfectly still, his eyes darting to the floor. Sebastian turned slowly. His face was a mask of dangerous calm. "Where did you hear that name?" "Genevieve," Chloe said. She took a step toward him, ignoring the warning bells ringing in her head. "She asked if you had taken me to the nursery. She called her a little ghost." "Sebastian, what is going on? You told me this was about a gambling debt." "Go to bed, Chloe," Sebastian snarled. "This is not part of your contract." "It is if it puts me in danger," Chloe cried. "I'm wearing your ring. I'm walking into the line of fire. If there is a child involved—" "There is no child," Sebastian shouted. The sound echoed off the high ceilings, but in the silence that followed, a sound drifted down from the upper floors. It was faint, high-pitched, and undeniable. A whimper. Chloe looked up at the darkened staircase. She looked back at Sebastian, whose face had gone ashen. Without a word, Chloe gathered her skirts and ran up the stairs. "Chloe, stop!" Sebastian commanded, chasing after her. She ignored him. She ran past the guest suites, past the master bedroom, up to the 3rd floor, where the servants' quarters and the old nursery were located. The crying was louder here. It was the sound of a terrified child. She reached a heavy oak door at the end of the hall. It was locked from the outside. "Open it," Chloe demanded, turning to Sebastian as he reached the landing, breathless and furious. "You do not understand," Sebastian breathed, leaning against the banister. "You cannot be involved in this. Open the door, Sebastian, or I walk out of this house, and I tell the first reporter I see that the engagement is a sham." Sebastian stared at her. He saw the resolve in her eyes. He slumped, the fight draining out of him. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a brass key. He unlocked the door and pushed it open. The room was dim, lit only by a nightlight. It was a nursery filled with expensive toys that looked untouched. In the corner, huddled under a blanket, on a small bed, was a child. She couldn't have been more than 4 years old. She had dark curls, tangled and wooled, and big, terrified eyes that were the exact shade of Sebastian's. Chloe's heart broke. She moved slowly into the room, crouching down. "Hello," she whispered. The girl flinched, pulling the blanket tighter. "It's all right," Chloe cooed. "I'm Chloe. I'm a friend." Sebastian stayed in the doorway, looking like a man awaiting execution. "Her name is Clara," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "She is Arthur's daughter." Chloe looked back at him. "Your brother? He fell in love with a governess," Sebastian said, stepping into the room but keeping his distance from the child. "A commoner. My father. He forbade the match. He threatened to disown Arthur. So they married in secret. When Arthur died in the riding accident, his wife died of fever 3 months later. I found Clara in a workhouse in Leeds. They had thrown her away. She is your niece," Chloe realized. "She is a thorn. She is a lady. She is illegitimate in the eyes of the law because the marriage papers were lost," Sebastian said bitterly. "If the courts find out she exists, they will take her. They will put her in an orphanage or an asylum because she is not like other children. She doesn't speak. She hasn't spoken a word since I found her." Chloe looked at the little girl who was watching them with wide, silent intensity. "And Genevieve?" Chloe asked. "Genevieve found the marriage certificate," Sebastian confessed. "She bought it from a corrupt clerk. She has the proof that Clara is legitimate. But instead of giving it to me, she's holding it hostage. If you marry her..." Chloe realized horror dawning on her. "If I marry her, she gives me the papers, and Clara becomes a legitimate heir. If I don't, she burns the papers, and she exposes Clara to the press as a mad bastard child living in my attic. She will have Clara taken away by the state to force me into submission." Chloe felt sick. It wasn't just money. It was a child's life. Sebastian wasn't fighting for his estate. He was fighting to keep his dead brother's daughter safe. "Why didn't you tell me?" Chloe whispered. "Because shame is a heavy thing to share," Sebastian said. He looked at the little girl, his expression filled with a helpless, agonizing love. "I am a powerful duke, Chloe. I own half the county, but I cannot save one little girl from a woman with a piece of paper." Chloe looked at Sebastian, really looked at him. She saw the exhaustion, the fear and the profound loneliness of a man carrying the weight of the world. He wasn't the beast in the library. He was a guardian standing at the gates. Chloe turned back to Clara. She didn't reach out. She simply sat on the floor, ignoring her expensive silk dress. She began to hum a low, gentle lullaby her father had used to sing when the debts were bad and the creditors were banging on the door. Lavenders blue, dilly, dilly, lavenders green. Slowly, tentatively, Clara's head emerged from the blanket. She didn't speak, but she reached out a tiny hand and touched the black lace of Chloe's sleeve. Chloe took the small hand in hers. "We aren't going to let her win Sebastian," Chloe said, her voice fierce, her back to the Duke. "Chloe, the debt is too high. The risk..." Chloe turned her head. Her eyes were blazing. "I am a girl from Cheapside," she said. "I know how to fight in the mud. Genevieve thinks she is playing a game of chess with a gentleman. She doesn't realize she is in a street fight with a survivor." She stood up, smoothing her skirts. "Genevieve has the papers," Chloe said. "Then we are going to steal them back." Sebastian looked at her, stunned. "Steal them from Sterling House? It's a fortress." "Every fortress has a crack," Chloe said. "You hired me to be an actress, Your Grace. Now you are going to see what else I can do." For the first time since they met, Sebastian looked at her not with suspicion or tolerance, but with awe. "You are insane," he breathed. I am your fiancée, Chloe corrected, and I think it's time the Duchess of Blackwood paid a call on the enemy. The Sterling Masquerade Ball was a riot of excess, a sea of Venetian masks, spilled champagne and illicit whispers. It was the perfect cover for a crime. Sebastian stood in the center of the ballroom, a towering figure in a black domino mask. He was the bait. Across the room, Lady Genevieve sat on a velvet throne dressed as Marie Antoinette, holding a fan made of peacock feathers. She looked untouchable. "Are you ready?" Sebastian murmured, his lips barely moving. Beside him, Chloe adjusted her own mask, a simple slip of silver silk. "She keeps the key to her private bureau in the locket around her neck. I saw her checking it at dinner 3 nights ago. She never takes it off." "And how do you propose to get it?" "I don't need the key," Chloe whispered. "I know locks. My father's creditors used to lock us out of our own home. I learned to pick a deadlock with a hairpin before I learned to conjugate French verbs." Sebastian's hand brushed hers. "Be careful. If she catches you—" "She won't," Chloe said. "She doesn't see me. To her, I am just a prop. Now go, make her angry. When she is angry, she is careless." Sebastian nodded and strode across the floor. The crowd parted. He bowed low before Genevieve. "A dance, Your Majesty," he asked, his voice dripping with mock deference. Genevieve's eyes lit up behind her mask. She stood triumphant. "Finally realized who holds the power, Sebastian." As they swept onto the floor, Chloe vanished. She moved through the shadows, slipping through the servants' corridors she had mapped out in her mind. She reached the door to Genevieve's private study. It was locked. Chloe pulled a pin from her hair, her hands steady, despite the thundering of her heart. Click. The door swung open. The room smelled of stale perfume. Chloe went straight to the heavy mahogany bureau. Locked. She worked the pin again, sweat beading on her forehead. The mechanism was stiff, fighting her. Snap. The lock gave way. Chloe pulled the drawer open. There, nestled beneath a stack of unpaid bills, was a velvet pouch. Inside lay the parchment that proved Clara was a legitimate thorn. "Got you," Chloe breathed. She turned to leave, but the door handle rattled. Someone was coming. Chloe scanned the room. There was nowhere to hide. She shoved the parchment down her bodice against her heart and moved to the window. It was unlatched. She pushed it open, the cold night air hitting her face, and stepped out onto the narrow stone ledge just as the study door burst open. It wasn't Genevieve. It was the head butler. He scanned the empty room, frowned, and closed the door. Chloe let out a shaking breath, clinging to the cold stone 3 stories up. She shimmied along the ledge until she reached the balcony of the ballroom. She slipped back inside, breathless, her silver dress streaked with soot. She found Sebastian near the punch bowl. He looked ready to kill someone. When he saw her, his shoulders sagged in relief. "Do you have it?" he mouthed. Chloe tapped her chest. "Let's go home." They didn't run. They walked out with their heads held high. But in the foyer, Genevieve intercepted them. She was flushed from dancing her eyes sharp. "Leaving so soon," she purred, "but the unmasking is in 10 minutes. "We prefer to keep our secrets," Sebastian said coolly. Genevieve stepped closer, her gaze flicking to the soot on Chloe's dress. Her eyes narrowed. Her hand went to her neck, checking for her locket. It was there. She relaxed. "Very well," Genevieve sneered. "Enjoy your night. Tomorrow, Sebastian, we finish our business. I expect you at my solicitor's at 9. "We will be there," Chloe said, her voice ringing clear in the echoing hall. "And we will bring everything that belongs to us." Genevieve faltered, unsettled by the steel in the seamstress's voice. Later that night in the library of Blackwood Manor, the fire crackled warmly. Sebastian stood by the hearth, watching the parchment burn. The blackmail material turned to ash floating up the chimney. On the table lay the marriage certificate, safe recovered and ready to be filed with the King's Council in the morning. Clara was safe. She was an heiress. Sebastian turned to Chloe. She was sitting on the sofa, still wearing her soot-stained gown, looking exhausted but victorious. "You saved us," Sebastian said. The distance that had defined them, duke and commoner, employer and employee, was gone. "We saved her," Chloe corrected. Sebastian walked over to her. He knelt on the floor, ignoring the dignity of his title, so he was looking up at her. He took her hands, the rough, calloused hands of a worker, and kissed the knuckles. "The contract," he began, his voice hoarse. "It ends when the debt is cleared. You have your £5,000. You are free to go." Chloe's heart plummeted. "I see. Of course." She started to pull her hands away, but he held tight. "However," Sebastian continued, his dark eyes searching hers with a vulnerability she had never seen before. "If you leave, this house will become a tomb again. Clara needs you. And I find that I cannot breathe when you are not in the room." Chloe went still. "Sebastian, I don't want a fake fiancé, Chloe. I want the woman who climbed a ledge in a ball gown to save a child she barely knew. I want the woman who corrects me about Turner paintings. I want you." He reached into his pocket. He didn't pull out the sapphire eye, the ring of the family curse. He pulled out a simple gold band. "Marry me," he whispered, "for real. Not for the debt, not for the title, but because I love you." Chloe looked at the man who had been a beast, a tyrant, and finally a partner. She smiled, and for the first time it wasn't a performance. "It will be a scandal," she warned, tears spilling over. "The Duke and the seamstress." "Let them talk," Sebastian said, leaning up to kiss her. "We'll give them a story they'll never forget." So the Invisible Woman of London didn't just survive the season. She conquered it. Chloe Vance proved that while titles are inherited, nobility is something you forge in the fire. They married quietly 3 weeks later, with only Lady Beatrice and little Clara, who finally spoke her first word, "Mama," during the ceremony in attendance. Genevieve Sterling was left with nothing but her debts and her bitterness, eventually fleeing to the continent to escape her own scandals. As for Sebastian and Chloe, they retired to Blackwood, turning the dark, cold fortress into a home filled with light laughter and very loud, happy children. They remained the talk of the town for decades. Proof that the greatest twist in any drama isn't a heist or a lie. It's simply finding the one person who sees you when the rest of the world looks away. And that is the story of the Duke and his daring fake fiancée. I want to know, would you have climbed that ledge to steal the papers? Or would you have tried to outsmart the villain another way? Let me know your plan in the comments below. If you enjoyed this Victorian romance saga, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss the next scandal, secret, or romance. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.